On the 6th of April, 1814, with his allies turned against him, and Paris having fallen, Napoleon signed the abdication papers, ending his reign as Emperor of the French. The Treaty of Fontainebleau, signed 5 days later, allowed him to retain the title Emperor. However, his domain was now limited to the small Mediterranean island of Elba. Much has been said about Napoleon's defeat in 1814, as well as his miraculous return to power the following year, a brief stint that ended with the famous Battle of Waterloo. However, the period between these 2 points is painfully underappreciated. The 10 months that Napoleon spent as Emperor of Elba are often glossed over, serving only to set up the triumphal story of his return to France. Yet this supposed interlude in the Emperor's life is endlessly fascinating, providing a wealth of insight into the man himself and the manner in which he shaped society. I'm the Enlightened Edelweiss, and in this video we'll explore the often neglected history of the Emperor of Elba. The ship carrying Napoleon arrived at Elba on the 3rd of May at 8 p.m. Disembarking the next day, he was welcomed with cries of "Vive l'Empereur" from the locals, as the island's new flag, designed by Napoleon himself, was raised for the first time. This first day was marked with much ceremony. However, the Emperor didn't rest for long. He immediately got to work conjuring up plans for his small realm. Napoleon was evidently itching for ways in which to keep himself occupied. He was known to be a micromanager during his time as Emperor of the French, and this nature didn't disappear upon his arrival to Elba. He concerned himself with the most mundane tasks, such as the rebuilding of smelly public toilets and the type of bread that hunting dogs should be fed. Some viewed such matters as beneath his imperial position, and even as a sign of intellectual decline. Napoleon typically woke up at 3 a.m., having coffee, reading newspapers, and dictating orders before breakfast and a walk. He would then take a nap, and by 9 a.m. he was up again, ready to tackle the rest of the day. He spent much of his time on Elba exploring the island, reviewing its mines, fortifications, and storehouses, while proposing additions and improvements to them. On only his second full day there, he spoke of taking control of a smaller, uninhabited island roughly 10 miles off the coast of Elba. In doing so, he joked to his companions, saying that, "All Europe will say that I have made a conquest already." He also mentioned plans of finding a way to bring the water from the mountains into the city, as well as the construction of a quarantine hospital and salt depots, among various other ideas. His time on the island also reveals a surprisingly environmentalist side to the Emperor. He imported various species of trees that were meant to diversify the ecosystem and tackle erosion. He also placed heavy penalties on polluting the island's wells and springs, and took measures to protect wildlife by restricting hunting to certain times of the year. Alongside his numerous schemes for the improvement of Elba, he rapidly got to work drafting a constitution of sorts that would serve as the guiding document for the governance of the island. Although only 3 pages long, it retained the defining features of Napoleonic government. It was clear in its separation of powers and the means by which these powers were funded. The document divided the administration of Elba into 5 groups, those being the civil administration, the communes, the emperor's domains, the emperor's household, and the army. These departments received funding independent of each other, with it being impossible to transfer the funds of one department to another unless Napoleon himself wished to do so. A version of the Council of State, called the Sovereign Council, was also established. Its 12 members contained both Frenchmen and Albans. However, this organization didn't end up playing a significant role in government during the short period in which the principality existed. Being a soldier at heart, Napoleon gave much attention to the small military of the island, which, by 1815, consisted of roughly 1,000 men. This was made up of a combination of local soldiers as well as the most loyal of the famed Old Guard, who had followed their emperor into exile. When he wasn't busying himself in administrating Elba, Napoleon enjoyed spending time with his companions, watching private plays, and listening to musical performances. His mother had come to join him in his exile, and together they often played cards, although Napoleon frequently cheated, much to his mother's annoyance. He also spent time with his sister, Pauline, who was the only other family member that joined him at Elba. His wife and son were not allowed to visit, a fact that he was extremely upset about. Apart from family, a number of individuals, including both French companions as well as British observers, shared his company. To them, he frequently spoke at length about his campaigns and battles, often attempting to portray himself in the most favorable light and clear up any inaccuracies he thought they might believe. He also held audiences with a number of British tourists who came to the island curious about its new sovereign. He was happy to entertain them with stories of his fascinating career. In return, he was eager to know the latest news from both London and Paris, extracting as much information about public opinion and the political situation as he could. He was also keen to know the positions of British and French forces stationed in the south of France. He watched eagerly as news of the successive mishaps and increasing unpopularity of the Bourbons reached him. Taxes and food prices had gone up, both soldiers' pay as well as veterans' pensions were lowered, émigré nobles who had fought against France were given command of the army, the Legion of Honor was demoted below newly reinstated royal orders, the revolutionary tricolor was banned, and events were held specifically for the nobility, with the exclusion of other non-noble officers. The Bourbons certainly weren't doing well, and Napoleon could see that. On the 15th of August, soldiers across France protested the Bourbon restoration by celebrating Napoleon's birthday. They fired cannons and shouted out, "Vive l'Empereur!" in open defiance of Louis XVIII. While Napoleon certainly didn't arrive in Elba with the intention of returning to France, a number of factors pushed him toward that decision. He found the fact that his wife and son were not allowed to join him infuriating. To add to this, despite keeping himself busy with running and improving the island, he found himself extremely bored. Then there were also the rumors that the Allies, gathered in Vienna, would force him to leave Elba for an even more remote location. However, perhaps the single greatest factor contributing to his return was that he was slowly running out of money. According to the Treaty of Fontainebleau, he was entitled to an income of 2.5 million francs each year. The newly restored King Louis XVIII, whose responsibility it was to pay this amount, had no intention of ever doing so. This meant that, considering the income generated by the island along with the money Napoleon himself brought with him, he had enough funds to last him 28 months. The British weren't completely oblivious to this emerging desire to return from exile. Given his suspicious line of questioning about France's military and political state, along with his precarious financial situation, Napoleon's British observer Campbell wrote letters to Viscount Castlereagh, warning him that the Emperor might be plotting an escape to France. Even so, no additional precautions were taken to prevent this from happening. On the 16th of February, Campbell left the island, intending to return in a short period. This was all the opportunity Napoleon needed. He had his ship stocked and painted in the same colors as Royal Navy vessels. He set off on the 26th of that month, embarking on what was to be his last great adventure. During Napoleon's time on Elba, he comprehensively reformed the island's legal system, built a hospital, repaired barracks, paved roads, planted vineyards and trees, installed sewage systems, created a system of regular trash collection, and built a fountain that provides clean drinking water to the city to this day, among a plethora of other achievements. This supposed interlude in his life serves as a microcosm, providing invaluable insight into the way in which this titan of history thought and acted. He was an obsessive micromanager, concerned with the smallest of details. He was unable to remain idle, choosing to spend his time exploring the island and busying himself in its reforms. He was greatly concerned with his legacy, already attempting to influence and shape the way people thought of him and his career. Though often ignored, Napoleon's first exile gives us a glimpse into the true nature of the man that once dominated Europe and changed the face of the world forever.